Fox News Podcast presents Brett Baer's All-Star Panel.
America's got to be in the lead if you want to deal with these threats. We're going to lead.
The mourning is over. The Shiva is done. And if you're a conservative, you should be optimistic.
You know, my main priority right now is making sure that it delivers for the American people.
We have to make our country great again, and I will do that.
I think the president gets criticized by people all the time for the stuff he says, by people who ignore what he does.
Now, Fox's chief political anchor, Brett Baer.
We are just days away from the CNN presidential debate. It will be simulcast on Fox News, where President Biden and former President Trump will go head-to-head for the first time since 2020. In preparation, President Biden has been at Camp David since last week, with reports stating a mock debate stage has been constructed, and at least 16 of his current and former aides have been called up to try to help the president get into top form prior to Thursday. Meanwhile, former President Trump has stuck to the campaign trail to prepare, also meeting privately with advisors and senators, having policy discussions, according to the campaign, sharing his thoughts on President Biden's retreat to Camp David while speaking at a rally in Philadelphia on Saturday.
As you know, it's been reported that right now Crooked Joe's gone to a log cabin to study, prepare. No, he didn't. He's sleeping now. Because they want to get him good and strong, so a little before debate time he gets a shot in the ass, and they want to strengthen him up.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the U.S. Supreme Court has its hands full with a load of important cases. Over the last month, we've received decisions on top issues like abortion rights, gun laws, and more. And now Americans are watching to see how the court rules in former President Trump's immunity case, which determines whether a president is immune from prosecution for acts carried out while in the White House. To discuss all of this and more, we bring in our panel. Fox News senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram, founding editor of the Washington Free Beacon and AEI resident fellow Matthew Continetti, and Democratic pollster Carly Cooperman. Chad, first to you. I guess there's just such a focus on the debate coming up Thursday. From a Capitol Hill perspective, what's the sense that you're getting of the importance of this moment, not only for the presidential race, but even for the down-ballot races?
Yeah, this is probably one of the most significant weeks we've had in the 2024 cycle. We have these primaries in New York and Colorado for down-the-ballot races here. But everybody is going to look at Thursday and then probably Friday morning at the Supreme Court and see what is ruled in the Trump case there. I mean, that's going to kind of tell us everything going into the fall. A lot of times we don't get these moments until September or October. It's kind of been stepped up. And I talked to some people who have followed presidential debates over the years, and they said, you know, we don't really have election day anymore. We have election period. Usually these debates would be held in September or October. And usually we would have these kind of viral moments, even before there was such a thing as a term as viral moments, that would come spinning out of these debates, kind of like a sports highlight or something. We're going to get those early on this time in this cycle. And that's going to, propel either candidate or diminish either candidate. People are going to get that early on in this case. Remember, we have early voting now. That's changed, since the pandemic. There was always a little bit of early voting, but that really is something that people will focus on. The other thing I would look at is that the Senate is not in session this week. The House of Representatives is. And so the reaction that you're going to get to the Supreme Court and certainly the debate, that's all going to come from the House of Representatives. As they're trying to, deal with some other legislative things, pass a defense spending bill. There's an amendment that deals with IVF that's very controversial. There's an amendment that deals with drafting women for, military service. They probably have trouble passing a DHS spending bill because of all the immigration-related language there, a lot of border and wall-related amendments. So all of those questions that deal with legislation are going to be superseded by what comes out of the debate, what the performance is, what the congressional reaction is, and then, whatever we get from the high court. So this is all very much a reactive phase that we're in right now on Capitol Hill, Brett.
Carly, there's two different processes going for preparation. Obviously, President Biden's kind of holed up at Camp David doing the mock debate. He's done that before in previous debates preparation. What about the expectations game and, where that stands now as we head towards Thursday?
Yeah, I think the Biden administration is happy to be in a position where the expectations are fairly low. He likes saying that he's often underestimated and he's outperformed expectations. That tended to be the general consensus that came out of his State of the Union address. He is prepping hard to look vigorous and lively, as well as being prepared to lay out the case for what he's accomplished as president, and also hoping to be able to make the contrast between having a chaotic Donald Trump versus him. And so I think at this point, there's been so much conversation about Biden's mental fitness and his age that it almost sets the stage for him to look strong. And I think he's happy to have the ability to exceed the expectations, or at least the conversation that has been taking place so far to date around how old he is.
But Carly, these Democratic circles that often are not named, in these articles, saying that if he does not perform, if he falls short, if there's some big moment that causes something on Thursday night, that this is a time when the party will decide whether he's the nominee or not. Do you buy any of that?
Not really. I think that ship has sailed. It would be very, very hard to do that at this point. There's been that's been like a constant, conversation and side narrative the entire time. We know that voters don't want neither Trump nor Biden to be the presidential nominees in large degrees. And there's a larger number than we've seen in a very long time of people that we're talking about as this double hater group, people who don't like either Biden or Trump. I still think at this point that we're just past the point of really turning away from Biden. And I think the Democrats, the leadership in the party is going to do whatever they can to propel him forward and make the case that this is a choice between Biden and Trump and not just a choice about whether or not you like Biden.
Yeah, it is fascinating, Matthew, about the double haters that Carly mentions. Those are people that really don't like either. They don't like their choice. They're angry about it. They're frustrated. They're, throwing up their hands. And it's those people that really, on the strategy side, it's going to be interesting how the campaigns have told their candidates to deal with. Because basically these group of people, and it could be north of 60%, are not happy with their choice, and they're going to make a choice based on which side sucks less.
That's a good way of putting it, Brett. Look, the double haters, the people who dislike both nominees in 2016, opted for Trump. Trump was new. He was a disruptor. He was an outsider. And he had more upside in the view of the double haters than Hillary Clinton, who they had known for decades and who they really didn't trust to be president. In 2020, though, the group that disliked both candidates then moved toward Biden. And what's been interesting about the past couple of years is that these double haters, or if you want to look at another metric, the independent voters, having backed Biden in 2020, they were moving in Trump's direction and responsible for a good deal of his consistent lead over the past 8 months or so. But since Trump's conviction, independent voters in particular have been moving away from him. And so I think Trump's job in the debate is to remind this group, the double haters, to remind the independents what they dislike about the Biden presidency and why they were open to Trump in a way that they weren't in 2018 or 2020 or even 2022. If Trump succeeds in that, then I think he maintains his lead going into the summer.
Chad, you mentioned the primaries, New York, Colorado. We'll have some more coming up in coming weeks. But on the Democratic side, the primary has brought to the fore this internal battle in the party about how to handle Israel, how to handle Gaza and Hamas. And it's very public and probably not to the benefit of the Biden administration.
Yeah, this race in the 16th District of New York between the incumbent Jamal Bowman and the Democratic challenger George Latimer, who is the Westchester County executive, really kind of exemplifies the divide inside the Democratic Party. And the reason it kind of comes out right now is that you have somebody like Jamal Bowman who's controversial, pulled a fire alarm, had to pay a fine during a congressional vote last year, had to go to court. very outspoken against Israel, and in some cases even Jews. Of course, Jews in that district will say that that's something that's important. And the reason is that you have a district that is swingy inside the Democratic Party. It was Bowman who defeated Eliot Engel, who was the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, somebody who was very aligned with AIPAC and the Jewish lobby and pro-Israel when he was in Congress for 30 plus years. So Bowman beat him in 2020. Bowman represents this core of progressives that are in the immediate areas of New York City and the Bronx and close in, certainly Yonkers and maybe New Rochelle. But you get out further into Westchester County, and that's where some people don't like this extremism. They are more aligned with Israel in terms of the Jewish population or the pro-Israel voters there. And depending on what comes out of this race, Cori Bush, who's a member of the squad as well, she is on the ballot with another primary. She beat William Lacey Clay, who was a Democratic congressman from St. Louis, the same year that Bowman beat Eliot Engel. And so people might look to that race to see, is there something that's chipping away inside the Democratic coalition? And as you say, Brett, it speaks to what's going on at the top of the ticket. Is President Biden, and will we get something out of this debate coming up Thursday night that either helps the president put that coalition back together again, or, kind of underscores the fissures that are there, because that's not working in the Democrats' favor right now.
Panel, we'll hold it right there. Carly, one would expect in the 90 minutes of the debate there'll be a significant amount of foreign policy, considering what we're dealing with Israel, with Iran, with Russia, with China. When it comes to Israel, is this tiptoeing, trying to get both sides by the administration, and does it provide a vulnerability that maybe the former president is going to try to drive a wedge in?
Absolutely. Biden has been in a lose-lose situation as it relates to his handling in Israel for quite some time, because he has his own party is fractured on the issue. He has people on the far left very unhappy with what he's doing. And then he's also got people on the right saying that he's not doing enough. And so this is going to be something where Biden is going to have to make his case that he is showing his steadfast support for Israel as a democratic nation in the Middle East, and yet also strongly wants to put an end to this war, cares very much so about the humanitarian crisis that's taking place in Gaza, and is doing what he can to bring an end to the war, to a ceasefire, and also to bring the hostages out of Israel. And so he is going to walk the line, and he has to come out strong on Israel. He has no choice, but it's something that he certainly hopes reach an end, because it's going to continue to be a problem for him in terms of rallying Democratic voter support, not necessarily meaning that they'll go and support Trump at the end of the day, but maybe they just won't vote. And so this is something where Biden's going to continue to make his case, and Trump is certainly going to try to take advantage of it however he can to show that he's strong without really being held accountable to what he says, because he's not the president right now.
Right. And Matthew, on the flip side, on the foreign policy issue of Ukraine, there's a vulnerability for the former president in that his party is semi-fractured about how far to support Ukraine against Russia. He said he would end it in 24 hours. Nobody understands how that would work. But there is a hawkish side of the Republican Party that wants to continue backing up Ukraine, pushing back on Putin.
Absolutely. And, Trump has generally supported that side while still saying he wants the war to end. He thinks he can end it in 24 hours if he becomes president, or lately he's been saying even before he becomes president, if he's elected, he'll end the war. Let's not forget Trump supported Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who was really the reason that the foreign aid bill passed earlier this year. And I think Johnson also did a good job in bringing Trump along on that. So Trump is kind of straddling this divide you're talking about, Brett. I think fundamentally, though, foreign policy will come up to some degree in a 90-minute debate, but I'd expect both candidates to stick to their respective messages. For Trump, that's the economy and the border above all. And for Biden, that's January 6th and democracy and Trump's recent conviction. I think by the end of this debate, we'll just go away with the picture that Biden has not been a successful president, but that Trump is too untrustworthy to be restored back into office.
And as we're focused on this debate, the Supreme Court comes forward with decisions, Chad, on really some big issues, not only federal government power and abortion issue, but mainly the one everybody's looking at is the immunity question and the January 6 cases that could, throw out or at least change the dynamic for some of those cases.
Those definitely could change the dynamic here as we perceive what happened on January 6th, at least what the Supreme Court thinks happened there. And also when it comes to, the president and future trials, the former president, and it pertains to future trials. I mean, both sides will see something in that and champion or undercut that, as I've reported before. You have Democrats basically running against three opponents this fall, Republicans, former President Trump, and now the Supreme Court, working off the Dobbs decision from a couple of years ago. Talking about the ethics of some of the justices that were Republican nominees. So that's something that they're really going to double down on and is potentially, if you look at the electoral success that Democrats have had when it comes to, the Dobbs decision, they're going to remind voters of that at every turn. I'll tell you the other thing I would look for come Friday morning, just not those Supreme Court rulings, but whatever idea that former President Trump throws out in the debate, which Republican immediately then introduces a piece of legislation that says, oh, we should do X because former President Trump said this during the debate. That's an effort to try to show support for him, to kowtow to him, to also resonate with their voters there. And the other thing that I think that viewers and listeners should pay attention to are things that aren't always the viral sound bites that we're going to get, but things that are unsaid. If you look back at the history of these debates, George H.W. Bush checking his watch, never said a word. People said, hey, must be time for you to go. There was a moment in the debate with Bob Dole and Bill Clinton. Both are about 6'2", 6'3". This is 1996, where Bob Dole walked downstage to address a question, and Bill Clinton was standing upstage. And anybody who knows anything about theater knows that upstage is the stronger position, and looked like he was towering over Bob Dole. And so those types of things that you both hear in the debate and that kind of resonate in the subconscious, those are things that are going to be important come Friday morning, and also what comes out of the Supreme Court.
Sure. Remember Al Gore, bad makeup job, and sighing in his debate against
George
W. Bush.
Every line from George W. Bush, you're right.
That's right. Carly, in addition to the theatrics and the drama and the images, Democrats I've talked to do seem like they've been inoculated a bit on the immigration issue because they come back to the bipartisan Senate negotiation on this bill that arguably can be decided that Republicans kind of squashed based on the recommendation, it's reported, by the former president. So that seems to give them a little bit of pep in their step on that response.
Yeah, I think between making the argument that Biden had tried to put forward and have the Senate pass this, bill that was supposed to help the border issues, as well as the recent measures he's taken, both in terms of trying to restrict access at the border, yet also make it easier for people who are married to Americans to become citizens. He's trying to take measures and be proactive on the issue in a way that shows that this is not something that he is just sitting on. He hears the people are concerned about it, and he is being responsive to it. And I think between those 3 points, he's hoping he can even go on the offense to some extent at the debate. Some will say that it's, not enough, too little, too late, etc. But he has created an opportunity to at least have an argument and make the case that, ultimately Republicans didn't do anything about it because Trump told them not to.
Yeah, and the flip side to that, Matthew, is that where were you from the beginning of the administration? Why did you undo everything I did that was working on the border, including stay in Mexico and an end to catch and release?
That's right. And these very sensational crimes that have been happening across the country committed by migrants who went across the border illegally, and then also the terror concerns that we've heard from high-ranking officials, including FBI Director Christopher Wray, former national security officials saying that the border is blinking red when you think about the 8 border crossers who were arrested for their ties to ISIS just a couple weeks ago. So I think the immigration issue works against Biden, despite what happened in the Senate earlier this year, despite his kind of executive order that he released a couple weeks ago. I think the economy continues to work against Biden, though he's doing a little bit better job, in my view, of concentrating on how he's trying to lower prices rather than trying to convince the public that everything is hunky-dory. The issues work against Biden. That's why he's losing this election, why he's running behind Trump. And to the degree that Trump continues his focus on the issues, that will help Trump continue his lead. The real problem, I think, for Trump in this debate will be, does he veer off into discussions about the lawfare? Does he veer off into discussions about January 6th and the 2020 election? If that happens, then Biden's momentum with some of these independent voters that we've seen in recent weeks could continue, and Biden could overtake Trump sometime this summer.
Last thing, Chad, what's the over-under for the two words convicted felon, either by the moderators or by President Biden?
Well, they ruled in the House of Representatives a few weeks ago that you could not speak ill of the president in that sense on the House floor. You can do that during a presidential debate. And again, that's going to be something that some Democrats are going to see, they're going to look for that moment that's going to resonate with their base. But again, as we've said during this conversation, it's about getting some of the people in the middle. And, the voters know about both of these folks here. And so any mud that the Democrats can continue to throw at former President Trump, whether it's deserved or not, that really doesn't make the difference so far. They might talk about that, but again, that's not going to necessarily court those extra voters. We saw that initial bump in the polls for former President Trump after the conviction, saw an increase in terms of fundraising. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that seemed to work with former President Trump. And most things that would undercut, most political candidates in a universe that existed before 2016, those things would be a death knell. That does not work that way with former President Trump.
Yeah, I will say there's a little softening in the independent numbers post-conviction, and we're just starting to see that in various polls. Panel, thanks so much. And now a bit of history. On June 25th, 1929, U.S. President Herbert Hoover signed the proclamation authorizing the building of the Hoover Dam. After a series of bills to build the dam were proposed and struck down from 22 to 1928, the Boulder Canyon Project Act was finally passed on December 18th, 1928, allocating $165 million for the building of the Hoover Dam, Imperial Dam, and the All-American Canal downstream. Construction began on the dam starting April 20th, 1931, and after 5 years of tumultuous work and $49 million, approximately $760 million today, all features of the dam were completed on March 1st, 1936. Almost 90 years later, the Hoover Dam remains a powerful force and marvel to Americans, attracting approximately 7 million tourists every year. That'll do it for this week. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Make sure to leave a rating and a review. We want to hear from you. For Matthew, Chad, and Carly, I'm Brett Baer. We'll see you next time. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.